So it's worth going back for a second to put in context the lean startup and what we've been doing, and then talk about where creativity fits into that process of. Um, so if you think about it, for the last 100 years, business schools have been turning out masters of business administration, and the focus and emphasis is creating a cadre of administrators, because at least in the U.S. we were going from a nation of small businesses into organizations where ownership and management were separated. And starting with Harvard's first class in 1908 and first graduate business class, Dartmouth had a management class earlier, but kind of Harvard set the pattern for what the 20th century would look like in business schools. And we basically learned a ton about strategy and organizational theory and tactics and whatever. And around the turn of the century, this is where I started looking at what was there for founders. And it turned out that while we were teaching entrepreneurship in business schools, it wasn't like I invented it, is that the notion was that startups are nothing more than smaller versions of large companies. And one can imagine where that came from, at least business schools, is most business school professors, when they consult for large corporations and solving large problems for 10,000, 50,000 person companies or larger. How hard could two guys or women in a garage be? You do what we're doing, but smaller. And so when I looked at all that literature, I realized none of it actually understood what we went through as founders. And so created a whole nother management stack. That is, if you think about it, what business schools have actually produced in the last 100 years is a management stack for execution. But there was almost no management stack, strategy, tactics, process, etc., for searching for a business model. The difference between a large company and a startup is a large company executes at its core a known business model. But a startup searches for a business model. And this distinction between search and execution had never been articulated before. In fact, just as an aside, the definition of a startup was never clear. I used to think a startup was the place you brought your dog, or the place where, you got free food, and maybe a place we were supposed to, sell stuff, but never understood that what a startup really is a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. Boy, if you think about it, that's pretty fraught with meaning. The goal of a startup is not to be a startup. A goal is the startup to be a large company. So therefore, the startup form of organization is temporary, designed to search. That's the distinction between search and execution. And what you're searching for is a repeatable and scalable business model. Not just orders, not just sales, but try to understand all the components, not the org chart, but who are our customers, what's our channel, what's our revenue model, cost, activities, resources, customer relationships, all the components that, in fact, Osterwalder nicely put in a big package for us. And so what happened is I first invented the customer development process. Eric Ries added this notion that customer development is paired with agile engineering, which came out of both the Toyota and software development paths. And then Osterwalder kind of invented the business model canvas. And when you combine those three components, business model canvas to frame hypotheses, customer development to test them, and agile engineering to build minimum viable products, we now had a process called the lean startup. We could actually teach entrepreneurs and educators and companies how to be incredibly efficient on how to spend money at the right time and put resources in the right order. That by itself, the lean startup, is an execution process for search, meaning we've now formalized a methodology, but it says nothing about where are the ideas coming from and what is it that we're searching for, and from a founder, how did I get this idea? And I remind everybody is that there's a whole front end to entrepreneurship that the lean startup and this methodology doesn't directly address. And because we're still kind of framing, how do we even articulate teaching creativity and what's called ideation, that is, where ideas come from. And probably the best person in the world right now who does that is Tina Zilog at Stanford, one of my peers in the engineering school, who's written a ton of books on ideation and creativity. Others have done so as well. But there is a way to kind of teach how do we think about new ideas? Where do new ideas come from? Do I have to be an entrepreneur to think up ideas? And the answer is, of course not. You have to be an entrepreneur to want to see them through. And there's a big difference between having some great ideas and actually having the tenacity and resilience and relentless execution of going through a lean startup or any type of startup process. But there is a whole front end, this creativity and ideation phase, that we've not yet formalized. And I've been encouraging Tina and others to kind of make that as a formal process, just like the lean startup process is the doing process. We need a formal process of the thinking process.